Welcome to the Jackie Scully Show. This is not your ordinary podcast. This is a space for heart-centered conversations, bold ideas, and transformative visions. I sit down with thought leaders and visionaries who are making waves in the world of heart, education, and consciousness. Together, we explore how we want to live, co-create, and thrive in 2025 and beyond. Every Friday, join me for inspirational and thought-provoking stories of everyday people creating extraordinary impact. These individuals are sparking waves of positive change, embodying the kind of impact we all aspire to create. This season, 3 powerful themes emerge: the heart of wholeness, exploring inner love, emotional balance, and our deep connection with awe; the future of education, rethinking learning through personalized pathways, collaborative growth, and community-driven transformation; and a new era of consciousness, expanding possibilities and how we live and thrive together. Come sit with me. Let's dream, build, and embody the world we wish to see. This is the Jackie Scully Show. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to the Jackie Scully Show. Today we have Alan Tang with us, and I met Alan through Hope Patterson in the Brain Trust group. We'd recently connected, and of course, both being in education and caring a lot about kids thriving, not just surviving in education, we connected, and I wanted to have him on the show. So I'm going to share a little bit about Alan, and then we will have him share a little bit about his background and what he's been working on. After spending 6 years in corporate finance in the renewable energy field, Alan explored a career in hospitality, chefing at some of London's top restaurants, seeking more balance in his life. Alan set up a consultancy focused on helping startups grow and scale, acting primarily as a fractional chief of staff. The fractional nature allowing Alan to continue his private catering on the side. In 2021, Alan fell into education, working for Synthesis before eventually starting CoLab, an online program that uses games, discussions, and escape rooms to teach kids skills for the modern world. Very exciting. I can't wait for us to talk more about CoLab. But how are you doing today, Alan? Thank you for coming on the show.
Jackie, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad that Hope reintroduced us, and she's got such an amazing network, such a group of amazing people, and you're obviously one of them.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, she is a master connector, and I have met so many brilliant and visionary individuals through Hope, and you're definitely one of them. So give us a little background, but maybe a little bit more context of that bio, but how you came into what you are doing now with CoLab.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I've had this squiggly career path, starting in a very traditional route, doing the graduate program, falling into corporate finance. And I really wanted to work in the renewable energy space. I felt like I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to save the world by building these, wind farms onshore and offshore to reduce our reliance on oil and gas. And I did that for 6 years, financially really well paid, weren't long hours. Typically, people would deem that as successful, but I got really disillusioned. It was quite a slow role. I wasn't learning a lot, and I didn't feel like I was contributing. And yeah, at the age of 24, I quit, much to the dismay of my parents, family. They're like, "Why would you give up a six-figure salary at the age of 24, comfortable lifestyle to do something different?" And I pursued something that I've always wanted to do, which was to become a chef. Um, Not many people know this, but I had a deal with my dad that, if I was comfortable financially, I could go off and do my own thing. I think he agreed to it because he didn't think I'd ever get to that point. So he was like, sure, whatever. Yeah, we can do that. So I became a chef. I remember it very well. I handed in my notice and I spent, 2 hours walking to some of my favorite restaurants in London, knocking on the back door, the back entrance, and asking to see the chef. And the chef was like, "You've got to the wrong entrance. The customer entrance is in the front." But I told them I wanted to be a chef, and they looked me up and down. They thought, "All right, come back tomorrow. Bring your chef whites, your knife bag, and see what happens." I had none of that, but I went there just assuming I knew nothing, being very humble, and just working harder than anyone else. And surprisingly, I got offered 3 jobs, 3 of my favorite restaurants. And I thought, why not? So I spent 3 years doing that, working in a Middle Eastern restaurant, an Italian restaurant, a modern British restaurant, and in pastry as well. And I loved it. Absolutely, best people. You're doing something productive. You're making people happy. Food really does bring people together, but as a lifestyle, it's not sustainable. You know, 16, 17-hour days back to back, 4 days in a row. You don't sleep. You're going out drinking. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy. And I wanted to find more balance in my life. I was at that point where settled relationship, wanted to just be a bit more stable. Um, so I quit and I'd had another pivot. I set up my own consultancy to help startups grow and scale, which was kind of what I did in my previous life, in this corporate finance world, but also then doing it fractionally so I could have, Thursdays, Fridays, doing private catering, learning to do other things, volunteering, doing some coaching. And I kind of came up with this fractional idea. I don't think it was a thing at the time. No one really knew what it was. When I spoke to prospective clients, they were like, we want you 5 days a week. What do you mean you're only going to be here for 3 days? But I made it work, and I'm really thankful for the people that trusted me, that gave me those opportunities, because it's led me to where I am now, where I've had loads of great clients working at like the Elon Musk online school Synthesis, working for a kimchi manufacturer, doing a lot of volunteer work for my local Chinese community, and working for Synthesis was really what opened my eyes to education. So I didn't realize how impactful it could be, how meaningful it was. And when you see these kids so engaged in what they're doing and they're learning so quickly and they're developing, it's like a no-brainer. It's the best thing you could do. So after leaving Synthesis, I pretty much committed my life, my purpose to doing something in the education space. And we settled on this idea of CoLab, collaboration laboratory, which is using games, discussions, and escape rooms to teach kids life skills. We knew that you needed some sort of vehicle to engage the kids because, traditional education, if you're going to just repeat that, you're not going to do anything different. Um, we wanted to do something that was meaningful. We know that as employers, the skills that you need aren't necessarily taught implicitly in schools. You might fall upon them, you might accidentally learn them in group environments, but we know that you need teamwork, leadership, resilience, emotional intelligence, how to negotiate, financial literacy, all these skills we wanted to teach, but in a way that's fun. So we made something that looks and feels like Pokemon. Parents have described it as Pokemon meets Sherlock Holmes. And, that's something that we've just really played into. I'll stop there and see, if you have any question.
Yeah, I first want to just say that your journey is so admirable. Like you are at such a young age to take a pivot. And I think at 24 to be making really pretty good money, and realize that young that this is just not fulfilling and I want more of a life. That is you were forward thinking at a very young age. And so I think you were kind of already falling into what a lot of people have been going through since the pandemic, but you did it even earlier. You got that energy in you. And these are the types of people I want to have conversations with because this is what it's going to inspire people to take back their life and live a life that is truly fulfilling, but also there's balance. There's a place where you are taking care of yourself. We have lived in an industrious society for far too long where people aren't living as humans anymore. We're living
Mm.
almost like robots, and breaking down. Our bodies are breaking down, and it's just not sustainable. Like you said, I love that you chased a passion of yours and you did it with such bravery to go to these restaurants in person and just knock on the back door and say, hey, here I am. I want to learn. I actually have a friend who got into being a chef kind of the same way. He was my friend in Hawaii. And he, was like, the best way to really learn is just go and do some free work in restaurants and learn from the best and like build up that, resume. And, you could also do like formal training, but if you don't have the money for that or don't want to go, back to school, some of the best chefs did it that way. So I think that is really, really brave to do that. And that you're like, I want to do something that I'm passionate about. But then you also later on realized, I do want to have that balance back. And I know the chef world, I haven't been in it personally, but just being friends with people in that world, it is. So unhealthy. Like you usually have really bad habits because you are working really long hours and you're in an industry where people are going to go out and have fun and drink afterwards because you're stressed out and you've been working a lot. Um, and then how you kind of went back a little bit to your corporate roots, but then taking it in a way that you want to do something really meaningful with education. I 100% believe in everything you're doing with CoLab. I just even love the name CoLab. I often think that schools should be like a laboratory and you should be experimenting, right? Like we have taken the fun and the curiosity out of education by making it about memorization and being on a conveyor belt and checking boxes and going through the motions. And that is not how humans learn. That's not how we have joy in what we want to be, and how we discover ourselves. So having this idea of having it be a lab and experimenting and infusing those skills of EQ and literacy or financial literacy skills, those life skills that are so important that in 2024 about to go into the next year are still missing in so many schools. So you are speaking my language. This is why we're here talking today. So now let's get into like the meat of what you're doing with CoLab. Please share what this looks like so that our listeners can have a feel for what you're creating. And this is of course online, so this could be accessible to many different markets like across the world and not just in like the UK.
Exactly. So just to, I guess, to take a step back, we wanted CoLab to be something that was very much human based. There's so many AI tools out there, there's so much technology out there. It's great and it really does help. But for me, education needs to have a human touch, a human soul, where actually your facilitators, your coaches, your teachers can inspire the next generation. They can make the things relevant. They can give nuanced feedback. They can model behavior. In some of our classes, things go wrong, and inherently, they go wrong, and we don't stress out, we don't panic, we literally act as if we're, what we're teaching, we preach what we're teaching. I think that's really important. So that's the first thing. But I guess to explain CoLab, the idea is that we host 1 hour sessions every week with a cohort of 12 students from around the world, and they're grouped by stage, not age, but typically our age range is 7 to 14. And we throw them into a classroom, a virtual classroom that looks like Pokemon, it's 2D pixel art, and they're given 3 challenges to focus on. So one's an escape room, one's a game, one's a discussion, and they have to decide amongst themselves which one to do. The idea is that we want the kids to develop those literacy skills, those oracy skills, but also how to uh, make decisions together, how to get consensus, come up with their own voting mechanisms. You know, this is stuff that's really important. And then once they choose a session, choose a challenge, we let them go into the challenge. And we don't tell them how to play. We tell them the goal, but they have to figure out the rest. And the idea is that we want the kids to develop that curiosity, that confidence to test things out, to experiment, to also develop that agency that's missing from a lot of students these days. And I think that we intentionally get kids from around the world to join because we want them to share languages, we want them to share cultures. It's also a really great way to learn English as a second language. I think we have students from 23 different countries, which means that when the clocks go forward and back like they just have, is an absolute nightmare, but it's absolutely worth it. This time last year, a student of ours was talking about Diwali, and the other students were like, what is that? And because when you're a child, you don't have to be politically correct. You don't have to be evasive around these questions. They were just talking really candidly about it, and it led to more conversations about Chinese New Year, um, about some of the Jewish festivals, about just like what different cultures do and how they celebrate. And I think that's really powerful because a lot of the issues we face today, I think, stem from these unconscious biases that we have. And the earlier that we can dispel them and interact with different backgrounds, the better. But yeah, so the idea is that we throw these kids into these challenges, and each of these challenges have a particular, I guess, macro and micro skill that they focus on. So it could be communication and leadership. It could be leadership and emotional intelligence. It could be resilience and critical thinking. Whatever it is, they're all developed in a way that's intentional. So to give you an example, we have a dungeon escape room. It's 12 kids in the dungeon, and the narrative is that you need to escape but you need to escape together.
Mm.
There are clues littered around, so if you read them and you crack them, it'll help you escape. But there are also guards littered around. And if a guard catches you, you get sent back to the start. And the only rule that us facilitators require you to abide by is that if anyone gets caught, you all get sent back to the start. So as you can imagine, first 5 times that happens, no one bats an eyelid, we're okay. So you get to the end and Alan decides to jump in front of a guard because he's exploring. And you all get caught, you all get sent back to the start, and you undo 45 minutes of work. How is that going to make you feel? How is that going to make you react? How do you deal with it? And this is where the facilitation comes in, right? The facilitators will jump in, ask those questions, help coach them to sort of see that pointing fingers and playing a blame game and getting frustrated is not the answer. Because that's the situation that these kids will face time and again in their lives. And knowing how to navigate them, knowing how to, the tools they can use to, I guess, deal with those emotions is really powerful. And this is, I think, where what makes this really special is that, the curriculum is great, but it's the facilitators who can bring this material to life, who can know when to stay quiet, when to coach, when to ask questions, because you then start to help these kids develop that agency, develop the skills that you're really trying to teach, doing it in a way that's not rote learning. Because I think, there's absolutely space for teachers in this world. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with teaching in schools. Really, really important. But I also think that coaching could be added to that mix because when you start to ask these questions, the kids figure it out for themselves. And when they come up with their own systems, their own ideas, their own frameworks, they last forever.
100%. I feel like we are having this conversation today at this time in November. I mean, this is going to air, in 2025, but in November, um, wow, for a reason, because I just started a side part-time coach position. And it's so true. I've been working with teenagers, and it's so much better when you are just listening to them and asking questions and giving a little bit of tips and advice here, but really saying, I heard you say that this is something that you use and it
Mhm.
seems to work for you. Let's see how we can use that with maybe another strategy of managing like your assignments and see if that works for you. Next time we check in together, tell me how that worked for you because kids want to feel that someone is actually listening to them, that they can take the reins of their own life, but that they have the sense of someone being there for them. There's a safety in that, and there's a sense of a care, but that you're not telling them what to do. And I do think there is a lot more, especially like kind of new age schools, online schools, some of these schools where they focus on kind of unschooling, and like the old system. And it's more about the kids kind of managing and figuring things out, but the adults are there to coach, to facilitate, to be there kind of just on the side. Like if you think of, yeah, a coach of, a sport, it's the same thing. And I think that would be a better way to see the use of adults in schools. Doesn't mean that you take away the subject matter expertise because you could still have that. So say, for instance, my background's history, psychology as my degree and, teaching expertise. So if I'm in a high school, I'm mostly a facilitator with maybe various different projects, maybe even something like this. But then a student wants to do a capstone, wants to do their own independent research, and it has something to do with psychology. I could then work one on one with them to be kind of that expert facilitator, still a facilitator, so that there isn't these sage on the stage expert of a field. No adult, no one is an expert in any field. It doesn't matter if they have a doctorate in it. You're constantly learning in that field that you're in. And that's why I love being part of education. But I love the idea of using kind of this interactive escape room gamifying, like a lab, a lesson, but it's not just to engage kids with we're doing that and it's just like mathematical or scientific skills or we're incorporating the content of subjects into like making it kind of this game which has been kind of around for a while, but we're focusing on like what is it going to what's going to matter when you are an adult in the world. You're going to need to work with people, you're going to have to struggle through difficult conversations, you might make a mistake, right? And it's going to impact the whole group. And you're going to kind of have to like own that and all of you know how to really like talk to each other about it and then move on. And that in a way creates better civil discourse, better ways of problem solving, things that we're missing in the adult population, especially as we talk about world events and politics. People don't know how to talk to each other. So this
Hmm.
is, I think it's actually critical. So what you're doing, you are kind of ahead of the game of using that technology and something that's really interesting to kids, but then taking the skills that we're just not seeing a priority and then putting that together. I love that so much.
Yeah, because we don't know where the future is going to go and we don't know what it holds. So if you teach kids skills that are relevant maybe now, it might not be relevant in 10 years. So we're focusing on skills that kind of transcend time because for me, as an employer, as long as you know how to learn, you can unlearn, you can problem solve, you can work in teams, you're a cultural fit. It doesn't matter what problem I throw at you because you could figure it out. But if we're teaching them how to solve, a formula and this is the only scenario you can apply it, then you don't have that ability to fix other problems because that's all you know. So it kind of goes back to what I think Elon Musk said this ages ago. He said, the best way to learn about engineering and mechanics is to just break down the car and understand what tools you need, how you go about it, what the challenges are, as opposed to just reading about it or, telling them, here's a screwdriver. This is what a screwdriver does. There's a very big difference there. And I think that's our kind of approach. We want to help our kids become future leaders who can solve some of the world's biggest problems, but they're also nice, compassionate people who think about the ethical side, because the world would just be a nicer place if that was the case.
I think so. And I wanted to touch on this idea of kids from all different backgrounds. So, you mentioned 23 countries, kids talking about different holidays. You don't normally get that in a regular in-person school because you're just with kids from your own
Hmm.
town. And it could be diverse and it could be not diverse at all. Like many kids, you grow up in a place that's probably not diverse until maybe they go to college, if that's their track. But then to have this opportunity to meet kids all over and they're in a playful space where they have to work together. So kind of organically, they're having these conversations because kids are curious. We kind of condition them out of being curious again in school, but kids, if you go back to like elementary, lower school, they are naturally curious. They're naturally going to ask you, why do you practice that for your holiday? What does that mean? Why do you wear that? Or, oh, I go to temple, you go to church. What is that like? What is that like? They they want to ask questions. They want to know. I think kids, they embrace what's different and they're curious to know what's different. And they're also curious to maybe even try it out. Like, oh, maybe I would want to like try to practice that or do something for Diwali. I'm going to tell my parents about it. So you're already putting them in a space where they're going to be flexing that kind of diversity conversation muscle
Yeah.
before they're adults. And I think, again, adults that didn't have a lot of those opportunities, if they stayed in a small town or stayed in places where it wasn't very diverse or they just didn't challenge themselves to meet a lot of different people, when then they're like thrown into maybe work or other spaces where there's a lot of difference, they could have those unconscious biases and not really realize it. And, that I think is like still a term that people are trying to unpack from the pandemic. But I mean, it's been around forever. Like I taught psychology, I was teaching it for years and years. We don't realize that we have those because those biases start actually when we're children, right? They go into our subconscious. And if you're getting kids early enough to be doing this type of work with like CoLab, it's like helping the brain, not have that. I mean, you're still going to have, obviously, we have bias in so many ways, but at least it's kind of limiting maybe that bias because exposure, I think, is the great, antidote of that, right? The more you're exposed to something, the more you're curious and asking questions, then you're not really going to have those biases. They come from being separate. And I like this idea of talking about Elon Musk of take something apart and then figure it out. And I think in school, we try to manage too much. We put almost too many training wheels on, like we scaffold, scaffold, scaffold. It's a great term in, the teacher speech is like, we need a scaffold, we need to do all this. I'm like, why don't we just unscaffold a little bit? Like take off some of the training wheels and let the kids figure it out. And you're still there to give them some guidance. And
Mhm.
I think there's a fear there. There's like a fear of the messiness and either I think there's a fear of adults not knowing what to do. Like if
Mhm.
things are really getting, I don't know, they need help and I don't have all the answers, or it's going to take too long. It's going to take too long. Time. We're running out of time. Time is always this barrier. And I think that's something we need to break down too.
There's so much to talk about that. I mean, where do I start? So yeah, completely agree with the whole, you know, like being exposed to different cultures and languages and backgrounds from an early age. But I also think just being able to make friends from around the world is such a nice thing. You know, a lot of this is now possible because we have the internet and we have things like Zoom. Um, I would love to have friends in Mexico, in Japan, in Australia that I could just go visit. Like how cool would that be? It's almost like pen pals, but in the modern world. Um, I think that's a real benefit. I also think that just doing it online also means that you can be so much more creative and it becomes so much more accessible. To do CoLab, you don't need the fastest internet, you don't need the best laptop. And we're working to lower the price point so that actually it can become something that anyone can do because education is the biggest leveler, but a lot of the times it's only accessible to those who can afford it. So, for us at CoLab, a lot of the money that we make goes towards scholarships for kids. We've just sponsored 7 kids in Ukraine to join
Mm.
CoLab for free. And is a lovely thing because actually, there are some challenges in the world right now, and we're just trying to give back. Um, the other thing I just want to talk about quickly is just this idea of it's not just kids who need these skills, it's actually adults as well, right? And when we ran this CoLab, that dungeon escape room with a group of adults, C-suite execs, they really struggled with trying to even get past the first room. And the reason for that is they didn't want to make a mistake in front of their peers. They didn't want to say something that was deemed silly or, maybe a stupid question. And there was no one to really say, look, okay, this is what we should do. They were just talking. No one was actually trying anything out. And I think there's a real fear of failure. I see this in a lot of young people leaving the education space, a lot of adults in this work in the workspace. There's such a fear of failure, of trying something new, trying to experiment, which I find really weird because in the startup world, there's this mantra of fail fast, learn, pivot, and it's the best way to. It genuinely is the best way to learn, but we don't encourage that. Um, and a lot of the students that join us initially, they are so afraid of making mistakes that as soon as they make one, they don't know how to react. So we've created this safe environment where it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to try things out. It's called a laboratory for a reason, right? You're there to experiment and helping them build that resilience and that confidence to try things out and realizing that actually mistakes fine. It's not gonna ruin me. And I'd rather make this mistake here in a virtual world that doesn't have any impact than in real life when it actually matters. So we have just focused on that because if you can help these kids build that resilience, that curiosity, that ability to just think about different hypotheses, testing them out in the lowest risk way, the growth potential is just so much faster.
Yes, I love this idea of embracing failure. And you are such an example. Like what you have created is stemming from how you lived your life, right? Like you just said, like, you go into something, you're like, this isn't working for me. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to experiment. Like you're a great mentor to these kids as well with this, it's like you don't have to always have the answer and think like, if I got into this thing and I didn't like it, I'm stuck in it because I don't want to be deemed a failure. No, part of life is just experimenting and trying things on. And you can get them to embrace failure younger than maybe when they are these CEOs and they're in big companies and things like that. They can embrace failure there. And they can lean on other people. So I think that's another part of it. It's like, you're not doing this alone. You're in community, like you're building community. And when you make a mistake, you're all part of it. You're all part of the problem solving and you're all part of figuring out how to move on. It's not like you fall you fail alone. And I think that's another thing is like when people feel like they failed and they are hard on themselves, they feel alone. They feel like they're hiding somewhere and everyone else is taking off and they're just like, and that usually leads to depression, right? And it leads to self-esteem issues. So there's so many different layers here to what you've created that is just absolutely brilliant. And I love it so much. As we wrap up here, any final words of what you're building or your vision of, how this could impact education, maybe how this could then become part of schools? I know this is something that's kind of adjacent to schools that, kids can do on the side.
I mean, the vision for CoLab is to really, there's two things. One, we really want to help kids become the best version of themselves. And we mean that, not like by like a grade or something, but actually how they feel or how they do things that actually have a tangible impact. So some parents will say to us, I can't believe my son is more confident, my daughter's making friends easier, my daughter's using more inclusive language. This is stuff that actually matters. So we really want that to be the case for all kids so that they can unlock that potential, but in a way that they're driven to do themselves. I think the second thing is that we really want to change this narrative around education where it's not just about grades, but actually helping kids become the best version of themselves, this whole holistic development side. Because when you speak to a lot of parents, especially in Asia, uh, a lot of times in Europe as well, it is just about, oh, my son's got 9 A stars, my daughter's got 4 A's. Great, but then that's just not them. They aren't, a walking, talking A. They are also all the other things that make them who they are. And when I'm an employer, I think about these things when I'm, probably when you're trying to apply to go to university or college, they are thinking about these things. So try and embrace that. And I really want to help educate parents to recognize that actually there are more important things than just grades, because grades will only get you so far. And once everyone's got A's, how else do you stand out?
Hmm.
And I think that, we are working with some schools right now, quite forward-thinking schools who understand that, having something like this will really help their kids become more well-rounded. And the reason we work with these schools as well is because we find that when the teachers who join our sessions sit in, they develop a lot of the coaching skills that really help them. And they then take that into the classroom and it makes the classroom a much better learning environment. That's a huge benefit that we don't talk about, but actually if we could do that for 100 schools and that's 1,000 teachers all being able to coach and teach,
Mm,
would the outcome
yes.
be better? I think so.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, when you're actually doing this for the teachers as well, because if they have the training to be more of a coach than just like a lecturer, right? Or just creating curriculum, that could make a huge impact. And that could maybe even be infused into teacher training, right? Like part of teaching training is like, how do we want to become a coach and a facilitator? Oh, I love it. I see this really going far. I am so glad that we were able to have this conversation today. I will plug all your information in the show notes, but just for our listeners to know, where could they find you, the website, any information you want to give them in case they're interested to check it out.
Yeah, so our website is collaborationlaboratory.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn if you have career questions, you want to do a pivot yourself, find me on LinkedIn. I'll send you, Jackie, the LinkedIn profile. We just want to help as much as possible. So if you have questions, just reach out.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for the good work you're doing. Thank you for caring about kids and doing something really purposeful in the world and being a visionary. We need more people like you. So I'm very honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. Have a good day.